Good morning or good afternoon, depending where you are in the world. My name is Fabio Teresino, and welcome to the Indosoft Web Studio webinar, Stump the Expert. We have been doing webinars for a few months, and fortunately we received quite positive feedback, and many customers asked for more Q&A time and for a chance to ask specific questions about their specific needs. So we've decided to create a webinar entirely only for Q&A. So there is no predefined agenda. All the participants are welcome to write your questions or requests in the Q&A box on top of the webinar bar or in the chat box. I'll be reading your requests when applicable, demonstrating how to implement the interfaces you need, or just explaining, telling you on how to implement specific interfaces. So again, welcome, and if you have any specific questions or requests, feel free to write them in the Q&A box from the webinar or on the chat box. So we have a question here, which is very common as well. Where I should start a project. So if I want to develop a project using the Indosoft Web Studio, which module I should start with? Graphics, database, communication driver, what's the best way to start? It really depends. One rule that I would apply always is start planning. So before starting doing any code, any development, have a good idea about the scope of development. So when you start coding per se, when you start the configuration, you avoid rework down the road and create a good structure. Typically, we start projects creating the tags database because that's the core interface of an HMI application. Everything else is based on tags linked to other properties, to addresses in the PLC, to objects on the screen, to items from an external OPC, to registers in a database. So typically we start creating the tags database, and from there we go to the graphical screen, again typically creating objects, and then to the communication interface or database interface and scripts. But doesn't mean you have to follow this order, doesn't mean you have to strictly finish all the tags database and then all the screens and then all the configuration. Indosoft was especially designed to allow you to work on all those areas little by little and evolve your project, grow your project naturally. But again, the most important thing is to plan ahead and have a good idea about the number of tags you need, so you can create the classes, you can create arrays, and you can use the most organized way in indirect tags, linked objects, to create a structure that is quick for you to develop, easy to maintain, and flexible to evolve as the project grows in the future. No questions here. Would like to see reusable pop-ups, for example, for pump stations that use many different addresses, different pumps, and quickly define tags associated with it. So pretty much the question is about how to reuse objects, and this is a very common question as well. So I'm gonna create a very simple example here, creating a new project from the scratch. So let's say webinar Stump morning. Let's create as local interface. This resolution is good. So this is a very common situation. You have a number of equipment that you want to monitor and control. Some of those devices are from the same type, so you have different instances, more than one instance of equipment from the same type, like different valves or pumps or motors, and if you have many of them, is not advisable to create each one of them individually. So Windows Soft allows you to do what we call object-oriented configuration. Define the tags for the equipment you have, define the linked symbols for the equipment you have, define standard pop-up screens for the equipment you have, and reuse them for as many instances of this equipment as you have in the project. So let's start creating the class for the equipment. Let's say we have a valve. So let's say class FV, for example, for one type of valve. And let's say that I have the command, the feedback, and I could have a command open, for example. Let's say yes. Let's say command close. Yes. And I have the feedback indicating if the valve is open or closed. Those could be Boolean tags, could be integer. I'm gonna leave as integers. So far I have not created any tags. I just created the definition of one equipment, the class, with three members: command close, command open, and feedback. Then I can create the tag, for instance FV, from the type CFV. And if I have, for instance, 10 valves, I could set the array size to 9 because it goes from 0 to 10. Or some customers do not want to use the position 0. You can set the position to 10. Then let's say I have a starter. So I can come here, or a motor. So let's create here C motor. And I can have the command, for instance, 1 to open, 1 to turn on, 0 to turn off. So just one command, and feedback. So it has a different definition than the valve. Again, I didn't create any motor classes. It's just a definition of a motor. Then I can create here motor. Let's say I have 5 motors, and each one of them follows the C motor class. Good enough for the definition of the tags. Now let's create the symbols for the valve and for the motor. So if you come here to symbols, you have many predefined symbols here for motors, for valves, for everything else. But just, and I could use one of those symbols in my example, but I'm gonna unlink this linked symbol and recreate a new symbol from the scratch. So at this point I just have here, let's even remove the position here. Okay, I have one bitmap here that I created somewhere else, and I could have just pasted in the soft, and another bitmap here with the green valve. So the first thing I would like to do is create the commands to turn on and off, to open or close the valve. So for this one, I can apply the command. And when I click on this valve, let's assume that's the valve 1. I can say valve command open equals to 1, and valve command close equals to 0. So if this valve, if the red valve is available, is being shown, it means that I want to open the valve. So I reset the command to close and set the command to open. And for the other valve, I do the opposite. So I set FV command open 0 because it's supposed to be open already, and command close equals to 1. It is good, but I have 10 valves and I have not specified what is the valve one, the index for this valve, 1 to 10. So let's assume this is the valve 1, the first one. So that's okay. Now I want to control which one of those icons will be visible. So I can use the position dynamic and the property shown condition. So I can define here if valve1 dot feedback is equal to 1, I want to display this green valve. And for the red one, I can do something similar. If the feedback is equal to 0, I show the red valve. Now I can have one on top of the other, group. In this group here, this group of symbols is good, but it's good only for the valve 1. I would like to make it generic and reusable for any valve. So I should create what we call linked symbols. Linked symbol is a way to create a model for one device, for one interface, and reuse it many times for different instances of this device, allowing you to customize some properties for each one of those instances. So right here, instead of just defining fv command close, I can assign an alias for this tag, for this property. And the syntax for that is hash pound sign, the name of the alias, like fv colon, and the default value. So the default value here happens to be the valve 1. But since I'm linking those values to a custom property called fv, I'll be able to customize those tags for each instance of the valve. And it's very nice when I use classes. I can assign the same alias to different members of the same class. So during the runtime, I do not have to customize each members anymore, just the main tag. It will become much clearer in a few seconds here. So I'm gonna use the same alias everywhere here. The alias fv, which is the name of my custom property for this linked symbol. And then if I want to create a linked symbol, I just right click, select create linked symbol, and type here the name of the linked symbol, like fv. Fv is good for this symbol. And if I double click on the symbol, I have the custom property, which for this one is fv1. I can copy this symbol here, and I can change, for instance, to fv2. And for this screen or any other screens, I can go to my project symbols. I have my symbol fv and change this one, for instance, to fv3. Sometimes you want to change many symbols at the same time. So for instance, I have those three. This one I want to make fv4, and this one I want to make fv5. But if I have 5 more valves, I could just copy those 5, group them, and use this replace option from Indosoft. And in replace, you have the option replace by parts, tags and properties, and I can change just the array indexes from 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So I can ungroup here. Very quickly, I created 5 more instances of this valve to different indexes, from 6 to 10. So very well, I can save this screen as my main screen, and I can run the project. And I click here on the valve. I'm changing the command, but I do not have the feedback from the PLC. So I'm going to create a quick script here just to simulate the PLC, which would not be necessary in the real world. So let's say simulation, team ID, for ID equals to 1 to 10. So I can say if fv index ID command open is equal to 1, then fv index ID dot open equals actually feedback equals to 1. And if the command to close is equal to 1, then the feedback is equal to 0. Save it as the script number 1. So as I click in the valve, I can open it. If I click on the green valve, I close it. So it is working as I expect, but in some cases I might want not to open and close the valve directly when I click on it. I might want to open a pop-up and in this pop-up open or close the valve. So let's create another type of valve, another linked symbol, where I do not have to click on the valve, that when I click on the valve, I open a pop-up, and in this pop-up, I open or close the valve. So I'm gonna unlink this linked symbol and create a different type of valve here. So I'm gonna ungroup those two icons here. I still use the position here, the FV to control the position. But here in command, I open a pop-up called valve, for example, that I'm gonna create in a few minutes. But before opening the valve, I can set a global tag called, for instance, valve ID with the index of the current valve. So I can use the same custom property I used here in position. The same custom property here, $, because I'm in a VB script interface. So I can use the field index for this tag. So valve ID, this tag valve ID receives the index of the tag set to the custom property of this valve. And then I open the valve dialog, the valve screen. And I can do, valve ID does not exist. I can create it as an integer. Should be a local tag, so different web thing clients could select different valves at the same time. So I can copy this script and paste here for this other object. Very well. Now I can group them. And just right click to create a linked symbol with the name, let's say FV pop-up. So now it's a different type of valve. It's a valve that when I click, I do not open or close the valve. I just open a pop-up. And just like before, I can create many different instances of this valve. Valve 1, valve 2, and so on and so forth. Valve 3, and keeps going. Can save it. Now it's time to create my pop-up. So if I edit the linked symbol, I see that the name of my pop-up is valve. No? Okay. So I can come here to screen, create a new pop-up, let's say with 400 by 400 from the type pop-up, valve control. Very well. And here I can create buttons to open the valve and a button to close. But let's configure the open button. When I click on this button, I want to set the valve FV, and the index is the tag valve ID, which I set when I click on the valve. Dot command open equals to 0. And I set the command close to 0. So the trick here is when I click on the valve, I set this integer tag valve ID with the index of the valve, and I use that in the buttons from this pop-up to open or to close the valve. So this one is to close the valve. And in the pop-up, I can use pretty much the same icon here, the same linked symbol, but the index, instead of being 1, would be valve ID. So I can change the size here, could be 200. If I want to open this pop-up in the center of the screen, I can easily come here to layout, right click in the pop-up and say go to the center. So it automatically changes the top and left coordinates, so this pop-up is always displayed on the center. Save those changes. Yes, I saved this screen as the valve pop-up screen. So now during the runtime, if I click in a valve, I open this pop-up, and here if I open and close, I open and close the valve that I clicked on. If I click on the second one, I open and close that particular valve. Since it's a pop-up, I can even click in a different valve here and open and close a different valve while the pop-up is open. And if I want to display the number or the name of the valve, I could do something very simple as, for instance, here in the screen attributes, valve control, and here between curly braces, valve ID. So it shows the number of the valve. Or I could have another member in the class with the actual name of the valve. So now valve 2, open and close, valve 3, open and close. Now I could have 100 valves and reuse the same pop-up to all of them. And if I want motors, if I want pumps, it's just a matter to follow the same criteria, but create linked symbol, one linked symbol for a motor, a linked symbol for a pump, and so on and so forth. But doesn't matter how many pumps you have, how many motors you have, you just need one pop-up for each one of them. So hopefully it answered the questions in a comprehensive way. Another question here is how to link now those tags to real world tags. And very good question, because in this case I'm simulating the feedback based on the command. But in the real world, I would link all those tags to external addresses from a PLC, from a remote I/O. So here in drivers, under communication, you can add new drivers. For instance, MoTCP for Modbus over TCP/IP, but could be different drivers. And here I define tag name. For instance, fv index1 dot command open station. Sorry. For instance, 192.168.100, whatever is the IP address of my PLC, and let's say 502 index 1. This is the PLC port number in Modbus ID. And then the register. Let's say holding register 1. Bit 0, for example, or let's say I use the whole word for this bit just to do it quickly. And here in the next line I can use fv index1 dot command close, let's say is the address 2, and fv index1 command or just feedback has to be FV, not FC. Same station, and let's say holding register 3. This one could be read only. And I can keep doing that and for all the valves, but typically when you have many equipment, the addresses are kind of continuous, and there is a more efficient way to configure all those addresses instead of typing one by one. And here you can take the advantage of a very useful feature in Indosoft, which is the ability to copy any information from any worksheet from Indosoft and paste in Excel and vice versa. So here in Excel, I can very easily create a formula. Like for instance, this one is the text FV and the value of this cell and command open. The IP address does not change. Here, let's say is holding register 1, read write always. And I have 10 valves, so I can come here. Oh, and for the address, let's say 1 here as well, and say this one is 4x and B1. So if I just click here and drag down, making sure that the PLC address does not change, but this one does. This one plus 1. Very well. Go down. One more to 10. Make sure the station is always the same. So now I have the addresses for all the command open. Copy here and just paste there. And for the close, I can very easily replace here open by close, replace all, copy the same block, and let's say now the address starts on 11. So the addresses change automatically. Copy here, paste there. And now I just replace here in this column. Control H to replace. Command close by FB, feedback. Replace all. And let's say it starts here on the 21. Copy, paste. There you go, I just mapped all my addresses in a few seconds there. Just using the Indosoft ability to copy and paste back and forth from Excel. And then I save my driver worksheet. Good, thank you. Some positive feedback here. Okay, so one question here, another very common question about combo boxes. So many times you use combo boxes to read information from a database, for example, and you use a grid or something else to select different rows from this database. But you want to be able that when you select a different record, the combo box updates automatically sorry, with the value of this record. So there are different ways of doing that. I'm going to show at least one different way, but to begin with, let's show how to create a table in a database and link objects like a combo box to this database. So I'm going to use Microsoft Access in this example, but could be any database, could be SQL Server, Oracle, Sybase, MySQL, and so on and so forth. So I can create a new database here. Let's say Stump morning. Create this database as a simple MDB file. And create here a very simple table. Let's call table 1 with one column, C1 and text. Do you want to save? Yes. So I could have the texts A, B, C, D. Just some text there so we can create a quick example. Sorry. So if I want to link Indosoft to this database, all I have to do is come here to Project, Options, Default Database, and click here to select the provider. In this case is the JET provider for MDB files, But if you're using SQL Server, you can use the provider for SQL Server, or for Oracle, you can use the provider for Oracle, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to use the JET provider for the MDB file. I'm going to browse the database file here, the Stump morning.mdb. Test the connection succeeded, always a good sign. So there you go. I have my link, my connection with the database. Then here I can go to the screen and create a combo box. And here in this combo box, I go to data source, database. Here in settings, I browse the table I want to read data from, in this case table 1, and define the fields I want to read information from, like the field column 1, C1. Save it. Very well. And run it. So I have here A, B, C, D. I can show the information from the combo box. And usually you want to know what is the label that the user selected here. So in the combo box, you can associate a string tag to the label field, like tag label, for example. Create this tag as a string. Tag label is created. Now I can display this tag on the screen, like tag label. Display here the value of tag label. So just to demonstrate that whatever selection I make in the combo box is written to this tag label. And then I can save this information to somewhere else, use this information somewhere else. But in many cases, my table has more than one column. And depending on the value of the column that I select, I want to select a different position in the combo box. So how do you set the combo box to a particular option automatically? The way to select one particular option from the combo box is by using the position field. So if I change the tag label, I do not change the combo box selection. But if I create an integer tag in the position field, I can change the selection of the combo box. So for instance, if I create here another tag, tag pos, as a integer, and create here one tag to configure the tag pos. So let's change the label here to tag pos and allow the user to input a value. So save it. So far I just want to demonstrate that if the tag pos is 0, I show the first option. If I change tag pos to 3, it shows automatically the fourth option. If I change tag position to 2, it shows the third option, and so on and so forth. So what I have to do is, based on the user selection, change the value of this tag, tag pos. So the particular question here was based on a selection from a grid. So one way of doing that would be to create a grid on the screen. So I'm going to create here the grid control. And the data source of this grid could be database. And let's say that I want to read data from the same table 1. And here from the column C1. Okay, save it. Now the grid control is displaying the same values. I want somehow that when I select the fourth row, I change here the combo box, for instance, to the fourth position, right? One way of doing that is coming here to advanced and using the row number. So this tag row number receives the number of the rows selected on the grid control from 1 to 5. And here in the combo box, I can create a tag in the reload field. So when I change, oh, actually for this case I do not even need the reload, I just need to change the tag pos. So here on the screen I can say that I create a value here, dim row, and if row is different from row number, it means the user selected a different row. So I make this local variable row equals to row number, and I make the tag pos equal to row number minus 1. So the row 1 would be the selection 0, and so on and so forth. So let's say yes, save. So as I select different rows here in the grid control, oh, and I have to enable the user to select different rows right here. As I select different rows in the grid control, I change the tag pos, and by changing the tag pos, I select different options in the combo box. In some cases, it's a little bit more complex than that. When I select a particular row here in the grid control, it's not the row number that matters, but it's the actual value of this row that matters. So in the while open, what I could do is select the data from the database and have a loop looking for each one of the values in this row, in this database, in the select, in the result of the select, and incrementing one tag, which would be an index. When I finally find the label that matches the label I want, I set the tag pos to that number. So the whole idea here to set a combo box based on a user selection is to use an integer tag and set this integer tag with the position of the selection from the table. So let's see if we have other questions. We have one more here. Editing the content of the grid can be done. Yes, by default, when you create here, let me just close the questions. When you define here the columns, by default, the checkbox input is checked. So it means you can just double click here and change the value. Like for instance, CABC. So when I do that, the grid control itself writes the value CABC to the database. Unless you configure the grid control not to. But by default, it would write the value to the database. So if I go back here, reload the combo box, you see that now I have the value CABC in the combo box. So just by clicking here, you can change the values and write different values to the database. Another common question is how to filter the values in the grid control. And there are two ways of doing that. One would be here in advanced, you have the condition field. So you just write the conditions here, like C1 equals to A, between single quotes because it is a string value. Save it. So it's filtering here the value A. But in many cases, it's not useful to have something hard-coded. You want to be able to change the filter dynamically. So I can use a tag here between curly braces. So C1 equals to, let's call this tag filter. So it's going to be a string tag, okay? And after I change the filter, I can toggle the tag in the reload field. So in the grid control reloads the data from the database, applying the new field. the new filter. So let's see how it works. Sorry. So I can create here the tag filter. Create yes as a string. Change here the label to tag filter and create a button on the screen. So when I click on this button, I toggle the tag reload. So I can change the filter here, and when I click the button, I toggle reload, so the grid reloads the data from the database according to the new filter. So if I say filter A, toggle, and look here, let me see the tag reloads here, 0, 1. Yes, and if I go to advanced, C1 equals to filter. So I'm not using the tag filter here. I just called filter there. So I'm gonna use filter here. So again, tag filter A, show. If I say C, reload. Oh, I do not have a column called C anymore, so I do not show anything. But if I say show C, A, B, C, now it shows. And so on and so forth. D, A, whatever it is. So I can change the filter dynamically. If you want to do a more complex filter and customize the SQL statement, instead of using the condition field, you can concatenate the where statement here in the table fields. So select data from table 1 where C1 equals to filter. And in this case, you have to go back here to the database connection under advanced and tell Windows to disable the delimiters. So it means you can customize the query in the table field and have anything there more than the table name. So I save it, run it, and change the filter here. B, now it shows B. CABC shows CABC. A shows A. So two different ways to filter data from the grid control. Either by using the condition field or by concatenating here in the table field the where statement. And you can create more complex filters where C1 equals to filter or something else and something else, group by, order by. If you know SQL, you can customize the SQL statement right here. So let's see if we have additional questions. An easy way to read and write values from a CSV file is a very common question as well. So first, I just want to show on the grid object how you can very easily read data from, display data from a CSV file. So I can use here Notepad just to create a CSV file very quickly. Let's say A1, B2, C3, for example. Sorry. Let me see where this application is. Get app path is in this directory. You do not have to save the CSV file in the applications directory, but it's typically a good practice. So if you back up the folder of the application, you can copy the CSV along with the application. So let's go to this directory and create here test.csv. So it's a simple CSV file with 2 columns. Now I can create a grid control on the screen. the data source should be text file. Here I define the path and the name of the file. So in this case, it's going to be get app path, goes to the application directory, test.csv. You can use expressions and tag names between curly braces in this field. So customize on the fly the path or the name of the file you want to read. By default, using comma as the delimiter, but could be any other character. And if I go here to columns, I can give names to those columns, like for instance, machine and production, where production is a numeric value. So I save it. During the runtime, Indosoft reads data from the CSV file, shows the data on the screen, and by default, the user can click here and change values. If I go back to my notepad and open this file, go back there to test.csv, I have the updated values, B5, this new label, and the value 3. So using the grid object is very simple to write information to a text file, a CSV file, and read data from a text file like a CSV file. If you want to create new files, append rows to files and things like that, you can use the built-in function file write. So just to make a quick example here, I can create a button and say here dim ID for ID equals to 1 to 10, next. I use the function file write. By the way, I'll create another variable called file name, which is get app path and new test.csv. So I can use here the function file write. The first argument is the name of the file. The second one is the text. So it could be something like, let's say 100 times a random value. Could be any values here. And the last one is a flag indicating if you want to append the file or not. I'm going to say always append values, just to do something really quick. So save here. If I click on this button, the script is executed. I do not have any errors here. So if I go to the applications directory, let's go there with Windows Explorer. I have my new test.csv. Just to show the content of the file, I can open this new text here with Notepad, and I have the 10 values that were generated randomly. So using the file write function is very easy to save information to a text file, a CSV, a TXT, could be a HTML, could be even an XML file, any text file. So one question here, can we write directly to the tags database if you had an Excel macro that created the tags and inserted them directly to the database file? The driver worksheets can be created automatically as text files in the DVD from Indosoft. There is a file under documentation tech notes called Indosoft CNF files. It shows the format of the driver worksheets. So you can create a script to create the driver worksheets on the fly. To create tags, you must use the development environment of Indosoft Web Studio. In the next service pack for Indosoft, we will create built-in functions to create tags on the fly. It is under development and it will be available in the next service pack. Okay, another question here. Phone number schedule. One question is how to create the atom time animation when I press the load profile of scheduler. The numbers of schedule is many and I have to delay. I think one question here is how to create a delay. Like I click something and I want to wait a number of seconds before doing something else. I believe that that's the question. And there are, again, many different ways of doing that. But a typical way would be, let's say that when I click the button here, I set one tag, and after a number of seconds, I want to reset the same tag. So I click on the button here. Let's create a tag. When I click on this button, I set the tag A, right? And I want to change the color of this button according with the value of tag A. So if 0 is red, 1 is green. So obviously, just the first quick test, if I click on the button, it goes to green and stays in green. But let's say that on the HMI, I want to reset this tag back to 0 after a number of seconds. So one way of doing that, which requires one additional tag, would be to create here the clock. So I can create here, for instance, a counter and make here counter +1, but disable if A is equal to 0. So I increment this counter only when the tag A is 1. By the way, whenever tag A changes, I want to reset the counter. So it starts from 0. In the first one, I want to count every second. And here is the easy one. Whenever the counter changes, I set tag A back to 0, but disable if counter is lower than, let's say I want 3 seconds, lower than 3. And it's done. So when tag A is 1, I keep incrementing this counter. And when counter reaches 3, I enable this line and reset the tag A, stopping the counter and resetting the counter for the next time. Let's save it. And now I click here, goes to 1 for 3 seconds and goes back to 0. Click again, stays 1 for 3 seconds and goes back to 0. And so on and so forth. So this would be one way of creating this interface using a scheduler and an additional tag just to be the counter of the timer. You could also do something similar without creating the timer with a VB script. So it is something like, let's create a tag B. Create the tag B, yes. And when I click on the button, I set the tag B. And then create a script. Let's say test, executing all the time. And I check if tag B is equal to 1, then, and if. I can use here this function dateDiff, which makes the difference between two different dates. So I can say the timestamp when tag B changed of value. So I could do B timestamp with one caveat. Timestamp returns the date and time dot milliseconds. And the function dateDiff does not support milliseconds. So I can use this function str get element using dot as the delimiter, returning the first element. So this syntax here removes the milliseconds from the timestamp from tag B. So the difference between the timestamp when tag B changed and now, And by the way, the first argument is the period. I'm gonna say seconds. So if the difference in seconds between the timestamp when tag B changed and now is greater, let's say, than 2, then reset tag B. In this case, I don't have to create one additional counter tag. So I click on this button, tag B goes to 1, and in 3 seconds it goes back to 0. Click here, goes to 1, in 3 seconds goes back to 0. So those are at least 2 different ways to create timers in the soft, to trigger one action and execute another action after a predefined period of time. Another question here. How can we get trained files recording to run at other PCs for analysis? Oh, one question here is if I can send this project to you once the webinar is done. Absolutely yes, I'll be glad to send this project to everybody. But the question here is how can we get trained files recording to run to another PC, at another PC in Windows Media Player for analysis? Sorry. The trained control in Indosoft is available locally and also on remote stations, remote web thin clients, or even SMA thin clients in an iPad, iPhone, Android device. So if you create an application with the trend control and you want to make this trend control available to a remote station, the most common way of doing that is just to make the other station a web thin client. Save the screens as HTML, run a web server here, and from the remote computer, you just open Internet Explorer, type the IP address, and get the information from this computer here, and access the trend control, the application, the screens from this computer. We can also dump the information from the trend control to a text file. So for instance, if I create here a trend control, at any time, if I come here to advanced, I can define here the name of a file. The format could be JPEG, PNG, GIF, BMP, whatever it is, and toggle the tag in the trigger field to dump the content of the trend control into a JPEG file, into a bitmap file, into a GIF file. And then I could even send an email to someone else with this picture attached. So someone could see the content of the trend control as a picture itself, as a graphical image, and analyze this information. Other way of doing that would be to use built-in functions in Indosoft. There are many examples on the Indosoft website to dump the information from the trend control into a CSV file, for example, an Excel file. And then you can send this Excel file with the table, with the actual values, and analyze the actual values in a remote computer. I'm not sure how you would like to analyze it with Windows Media Player. Windows Media Player plays pretty much videos. So one way of doing that would be to, on the server, just play the trend control and use an ActiveX control or an external tool like Camtasia Studio to record the screen, save this information as a video, MPEG, and then use Indosoft to send, for instance, this video by email. And the function you can use to send any files by email, a JPEG, a video, whatever it is the send email ext. So first, you would come here to project, uh, under email FTP, and you would define here the SMTP server address, the from, the port, if the server requires SSL or not. So the main settings for the email server. From this point on, in any interface from Indosoft where you can execute a function, you can just execute the function for email, send email ext, which is right here on the mail functions, this one. So the first argument is the subject, the second one is the message, two CC and BCC recipients, and the path and name of one or more than one files that you want to send attached to the email. So one question here is about the SMA solution. If I can show the SMA solution, absolutely. Here on version 7.1, we have the option here for mobile access. And just by clicking on this icon, it opens the interface where you can configure the settings for the SMA solution. And then we can define alarms, trends, and process screens. So just to do something quick, I can have here the tag A, the tag B, the tag pause, and have labels for each one of them. Like for instance, let's say pump, motor, I don't know, selection, whatever it is. Define if the user can write values or not, if you want to trend or not, and the range for each one of them. And for the process screen, you can change the kind of widget. Like for instance, for A and B that are Boolean, I'm going to use the switch. And for this one, I'm going to use the semicircular gauge. And for the trend control, you can also define the color of the pens. So for this one, doesn't matter because, well, for the trend control could be green. So it's very, very simple. You just define the tags you want to display, the areas. In this case, I'm creating everything on the main area. Save here and run. You need to have a web server running on the computer. I'm not sure if I have a web server running here, but I will figure out in 1 minute. Type the IP address of the computer /ma/logon.aspx from any web browser. In this case, I'm using Google Chrome, but could be an iPad, could be an iPhone. So it looks like I have a web server running in this computer. So I type a valid username and password. So Indosoft checks the username and password, shows here the areas. If I go to process values, I have my pump, motor, and selection. The application is running here. If I turn the pump on here and write, then this bit goes to 1 there, eventually to 0, and back to 0 here. So selection right now is in 0. So I could click here and change, for instance, the selection to 19. And write, this value is written to the server. I have 19. If I change here to 0, it comes back to 0 here. So it's very simple to create interfaces for the SMA and display those values in an iPad, in an Android device, in an iPhone. If I go to trends, then I can visualize online trend, history trend, go here to settings and say play on, for example, for the online trend. And I see the values here. The values are 0, but if the values would change to different values, I would see them changing there. Sorry. So this is a very brief demonstration on how to configure SMA to display alarms, process values, and trends in any remote device, including tablets and cell phones. So we are a few minutes beyond the 1 hour here. Maybe we have time for one more question. Let's see. Can we have multiple pages on the SMA? Absolutely yes. So here is the main page, but you can right click here and create what we call areas, sub areas. So give name to the areas, like for instance, let's say zone B, whatever it is. And here in zone B, you create your own tags for trains, alarms, and you can create sub areas of sub areas, like for instance, oven, the oven of zone B. And here create your own tags and filter your own alarms. So during the runtime, you can display different icons there and use the built-in icons to navigate through different areas and sub areas. So with that, I would like to thank everybody for taking the time for this webinar. I apologize if there was not time to answer all the questions, but I will read all of them after the webinar and follow up with each one of you individually. Again, thank you very much for taking your time today. Hopefully it has been useful for you, and I hope to see you again in 2 weeks. Good afternoon and good morning to everybody. Bye-bye.